everyone. Welcome to Small Stages, Big Sounds. This is a special episode where I'm discussing with the Chief Exec of the Grassroots Music Venues, Mr. Mark Davyd. Thanks, Mark, for agreeing to have a chat to me.
Nice to be here, David.
And basically, we're going to have a chat about what's happened. I know a lot's happened in the last few weeks since I was first in contact with you. But I'm based in South Wales, and the Welsh music scene is actually very lively at the moment, with a lot of bands making it into the national charts, which is really good for the South Wales area. And it's good for me because I get to go to a lot of good gigs as well. But there are other venues struggling across the UK. And there are artists struggling to find venues as well where there aren't so many venues. So the one thing I want to say first up is I came across Hereby via your website. And that is an incredible resource. Absolutely incredible resource. And I'm telling everybody that I know about it because, not artists, everybody, because it's a fantastic resource for them to find venues if or find things if they want to go on as fans. So first up, that's my first congratulations to you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. It's been quite hard to get together a gig guide or at least a venue guide that's quite authoritative. And our partnership with Hereby has finally done that. It's quite underused. So yeah, I think pushing people towards it is quite a good thing. It's just gig guide at musicvenuetrust.com. So it's definitely sitting there. I strongly encourage artists to have a look through it.
Well, I've spoken to artists that have said we don't know anything about it, and I've spoken to venue owners and they don't know anything about it. So I'm trying to promote it from my aspect as a fan.
Yeah.
You imagine people go away on holidays, they want to find something to do, and it's easy to find anything, and it's not just music. That's what I like about it. There are other things that are included on it as well.
Yeah, it's a list of, venues that are, from our point of view, it's a list of venues that are heavily investing into new and emerging bands. That's the main thing we do. But within that resource, yes, you're right, it does cover lots of other things as well. And you can change the filters and parameters to find lots of interesting stuff that's happening wherever you are.
So, as I said, we said that a lot of things have changed quite dramatically over the last few weeks. What do you see as the most pressing issues facing Grassroots from this point onwards?
Well, I think I should first of all say, David, I think you're absolutely right. We're actually in a bit of a golden moment, frankly, for great new bands. South Wales certainly is having a big moment. There's a lot of really, really excellent new music out there. I'm a regular gig goer myself. I think I've seen 8 to 10 bands that are genuinely in the excellent category in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So that's really encouraging. The reality, though, is that it is unbelievably hard at the grassroots level now for venues and artists and promoters. And what that is resulting in is that we are probably missing out, frankly, on some of the opportunity to build great careers that we would like to see. So, artists really can't afford to tour. It's incredibly expensive to do that with the accommodation costs, petrol, everything has just really shot up, which everybody listening will know that's, there's a cost of living crisis is the headlines in the papers. But when you see it, when people don't have any option other than to be eating out or have any option other than to travel or have any option than to need somewhere to stay, that all hits the artist's ability to do that. And then for venues, you've got massive increase in rents, you've got massive increase in energy bills, in staffing costs, and the whole thing is just creaking a little bit. And then promoters, I'd say the same thing, you look at all those circumstances and how much it's going to cost you to put the band on and how much you could possibly make back. And you just think this is too much risk. So it's definitely an odd time because as a music fan myself, I'm hearing more great music at one time than I've heard for several years. But we are really struggling to get that music in front of audiences because we just can't raise the funding for it.
I know there are many artists supporting the work of the Music Venue Trust. Thinking of people, the recent announcements like Sam Fender and Coldplay, and also Katy Perry in terms of their contribution to the Music Venue Trust, which is absolutely brilliant. A lot of artists are doing that. What progress has been made with regards to implementing the sort of levy on the stadium tickets and arena tickets to support the grassroots venues?
Well, you've mentioned 3 great examples there, and I also should throw in Enter Shikari, who were the first band ever to do this, and have really trailblazed the concept. But I think there is a real need now to make this the standard thing that happens rather than the exception. And you're right. Katy Perry announced this week, which is fantastic for us. And I learned something about Katy Perry as well. I learned that Katy Perry actually came to the UK first of all and played in a tiny club called Water Rats in London. So her history of doing that, and being in the band and everything is probably more solid than I realised, and definitely a lot more solid than a lot of other people realised. So that's great. But I think early this year we had that Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee. They recommended that arena and stadium tickets should effectively be contributing to research and development, which is what this is, with a small contribution from every ticket. The government responded to that last week and said, yes, absolutely, they agree. So we're into a different era now where a contribution from stadium arena tickets is actually government policy. So, at that point, the music industry itself, the music industry itself needs to think, wow, are we doing something that's flowing against government policy? And at the moment, the best way to do this, best way to achieve it, is certainly going to be by doing it voluntarily, as those artists have already done and their teams have done. I should say, this is not one artist going out. Katy Perry's whole team, the agent, the promoter, everybody was involved. So I think I would like to see that happen very quickly, because we do desperately need to get the support we need into the grassroots. If it doesn't happen very quickly, I don't think the patience of government is very long on this issue. We met with Lisa Nandy, the Secretary of State for Culture, this week, and it was fairly clear there is a certain level of frustration that it hasn't already happened, and certainly a willingness to bang a few heads together and make sure that it does get done. But £1 on every stadium and arena ticket would raise somewhere between 15 and 25 million, depending on what year it was. Just think of all the bands that you and me have seen that could desperately do with £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 to be able to play 20 shows instead of being able to play 3 or 4 shows.
To record new music
it's just common sense,
Given the recent change in the government budget, do you see that having a big impact on the local music venue scene, particularly sort of last minute contributions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are very, very worried and expressed that to government this week. The direction of travel here is excellent. And we have a date in our minds where we're pretty convinced that some of the things this government are proposing will kick in, and the situation for venues will improve. And when that improves, the situation for artists and promoters will improve, because we're an ecosystem. We all lean on each other. But that date, unfortunately, is April 2026. I'm talking to you in November 2024. And we've got a whole 18 months to get through, in which I would hate to see positive movement here towards a more sustainable sector be blown off course by a series of closures. But, just before I started talking to you, we have discovered another venue that has unfortunately been forced to close. I'm getting the details of that now. We are back up to 2 a week.
Yeah, there are 2 in the Bristol area that are struggling. They'll probably close next year.
Yeah, and so we are aware of, because we work very closely with the venues, there are a surprising number of venues who are in a difficult situation with this whole thing. So, yeah, the business rate changes are very significant, so that's a problem. And alongside that, the changes to the national insurance contributions are more significant in this sector, because it's a gig economy in both senses of the word. Yeah. People have portfolio careers where they don't, you might work on the bar and you might be a musician and you might have to do some job. It's all builds together so you can earn a living. But, the NI contributions, between those 2 tax changes, there is potentially £25 million in extra taxes have hit the sector from the budget.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. When you think that, collectively the entire sector only made £2.9 million in profit. All 827 venues we represent.
10 times the amount that...
10 times the amount of profit was, in the last 12 months.
Dear God. Yeah. Now, obviously, there is a cost of living crisis, but what strategies do you think you could help to promote venues with regards to audience confidence?
That's a great question. Very important. I mean, we have seen there's lots of things that have rolled out the back of the pandemic. which I think a lot of people know, changes in audience behavior. There's also some societal things going on. Actually, young people are drinking less. And when you're in a sector which has used the money from the sale of alcohol to support live music, that can be very problematic. But it's not an unsolvable problem. And also, I want to be really clear. Our problem is not that people don't love live music. That's not it.
No.
I was in Belfast the other week. I saw a band called Panic Over. They were, they looked about 14. They're probably about 20. My subjective view of it is probably a bit odd, but the room was full, absolutely packed with young people having a great night out. And the best thing of all about it, which I didn't notice, and somebody else leant over and said, "I've just worked out what's different." What was different was no phones. Nobody had their phone out. Everybody was just enjoying the gig and having a great time. I think we're entering a period where people are going to want to be more part of in real life experiences. That thing of just staring at your phone all day. Well, I think people have got tired of that a bit, actually, and now they're starting to look, how do we get out? This is really solvable. A small amount of money from arena and stadium tickets would enable venues to be open, enable artists to be on tours, enable promoters to take risks, and then we can have a really thriving circuit that isn't just full of great new music, as we've already got, but it's great new music that's getting through to great new audiences. That's the big challenge for us.
Yeah. So with the recent venue closures, do you have any idea of the impact that's had on artist development? I know some bands that I've been following for several years have just said enough's enough in the last 6 months or so.
It's very sad to see that level of potential, and realise that, wow, that band definitely would have had a sustainable career in front of them, but they just can't afford to carry on at this point. And that's, I think, that's always the message I take to people in the music industry. The one that I think about, if you don't want to think about how important it is to support artists or music in our local communities, just think about your future profits, because we have bands that could have been the next Arctic Monkeys or the next Oasis or the next Adele or the next Dua Lipa giving up because they can't afford to keep going. That cannot be good. We've got to get on top of that issue. It's wasted potential is one of the most frustrating things there is in the whole live music sector, isn't it? When you see a band and you think, wow, millions of people are going to love that band, and then you read 3 or 4 months later, we had to cancel the tour. This person's left because they can't afford to be in the band anymore, and then the enthusiasm wanes. It's a very sad outcome, but we need to tackle that. That's the most important thing: keeping people in the game.
On that point, then, do you see a role for the Music Venue Trust in supporting the educational establishments like universities with regards to music development, the music colleges and things like that? Because I'm aware that Ed Sheeran started in Guildford and my son started in Cardiff, and Cardiff has an annual festival called Immersed that is due to launch next week, actually, and I'm going to pop along to the launch for that. So do you see a role for the Music Venue Trust in terms of that aspect of it?
I wouldn't step on anybody else's toes, because I think there are a lot of really great organisations already working in that space. But I'll repeat, it's an ecosystem. The success of the venues that we represent spreads out to the artists, the promoters, spreads out to music colleges, spreads all the way through. Why do people go to a music college? Because they want to try and get a career in music. Okay, what careers have we got for them? And really importantly to me, what sustainable, economically viable careers have we got for them? We did a piece of work a couple of years ago, which we've never repeated because it was too depressing, but how much were venue operators paying themselves? And the reality is very large numbers of the venue operators were paying themselves less than minimum wage.
Yeah, I was talking to one last week, a very successful venue not far from me, and she said, I don't take a wage out of this.
Yeah. It's an incredible number of them have got what they lovingly call second careers, which what they actually mean is, this is now my hobby. I've got a job, and it's,
this is my hobby,
Yeah. It's and by the way, I should say, it's a lot of responsibility to be running a venue that isn't actually paying you. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's
a lot of stress.
We're into a real dramatically bad situation there.
Mm.
not just for the venue operator themselves, but for succession planning. Who's going to
Yeah.
come in and run that venue when that person needs to get up if there's literally no financial reward for doing it at all?
I mean, you've had some recent announcements where you've purchased some venues that were, successful venues, but needed that element of support. I'm
Yep.
particularly thinking of the Bunkhouse in Swansea, which was one of the most recent announcements. Now, one of the local communities has a community group that's just reopened the music venue as a community support. And do you see you having used yourself having a role in supporting them to make that a success?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, if somebody's opening a venue, we always want to be involved. I mean, that whole ownership piece is not about us running venues. It's about removing that issue of freehold landlords
Mm,
who aren't interested in music.
yeah.
People think I'm having an argument with landlords. I probably would do that separately to doing this, but in this particular role that I that I fill, we're not against landlords, but we don't
Mm,
think private landlords is a good way to own music venues because look, what does a landlord really want? They want a tenant with lots of money who's very quiet.
mm.
I mean, that's the opposite. It's literally the opposite.
Very
So,
much so.
yeah, very much so. So you've got a noisy tenant who's really, really struggling to raise the cash to pay you. So it makes a
Yeah.
lot more sense for those venues to be owned by the community, which is what
Mm,
we do with music venue properties. And it
mm,
makes a lot more sense where we've got this big national program of doing it, which is how we bought the bunkhouse. And I can exclusively reveal we will be buying another one in Wales very soon.
lovely,
Can't tell you which
jubbly.
one it is yet because we're still finally negotiating that. But again, the plan is to create, from our point, effectively a national trust of music venues. That's what we're creating. Great
Great.
venue operators like Jordan and his team at Bunkhouse, a landlord that's absolutely in tune with that and wants to support that team
Mm,
and give them stability and know that they're going to be there for years so they can plan for years. We'll manage the building, the risk of the tiles coming off the roof,
mm,
etc. The venue operator manages the program, the staff, the artists. Really get people focused on what's the best thing I can do for the local community. I'd love to see more people in not everywhere across the country. I've learned a lot about this community ownership stuff, and I've
mm,
realised actually even just philosophically and ideologically, it's a great thing to do. Why is that?
mm,
Okay, we bought the Snug in Atherton in Greater Manchester, and business has gone up. And why has it gone up? Because that community now understands that that is their facility; it belongs to
mm.
them.
Yeah.
So if you're sat in your house on Tuesday on 6 o'clock and you think I'm bored, what shall I do? You can think, oh, I'll go and visit the place I own.
Mm.
It belongs to me and everybody else around us. It's ours, and I think that is a great message to send to people. We're having great conversation with government about this, not just on music venues, sports grounds,
Mm.
libraries, museums. It'd be much better if we all owned a stake in our local community.
Well, it's like in Wales yesterday, there was an announcement about Powys closing all their leisure centres. They should be community. They want people to get exercise and get fit, and they go and do something like that.
Yeah.
Because the local governments can't afford to run them. It's the same principle.
Yeah, and there's so many. We talk about people who don't feel like they're represented or don't feel like they have a place. This is a great way to make people feel this is my town. This is
Mm.
and it talks to a lot of things. Why can't you have a big music career choosing to stay where it is that you feel you have your
Mm.
roots?
Mm.
Shouldn't have to move to wherever the action is. The action should be all around us.
Well, the bands are all around us.
Exactly.
They're from everywhere. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, they'll play their local venues, and everybody will get, to all intents and purposes, get sick and fed up of hearing them. But because it's the same thing. They're there all the time. But I mean, they need to get out. They need to be able to go places that are A, not too far away, and B, are willing to pay them for their efforts.
Yes. 100%.
Because I've heard artists saying that someone will turn around and say, "Well, you're getting 100 quid for this." Yeah, 100 quid divided by four. Take away
Yeah.
the petrol, take away the transport, take away all the creative stuff that we have to do to create the music in the first place, and we're probably losing money at the best of times.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, listen, I promoted my first show 40 years ago this year. I put on a band called 999 that you and me might vaguely remember, but most people
I
won't.
do.
Yeah, okay. I put them on. I paid the band. I booked the PA. I booked the security. I didn't own the bar. I just went to a hall and put it on, and made a little bit of money. If you did exactly the same thing now, you would go bankrupt incredibly quickly. You just can't afford to do it. But on that show, there were two support bands, and the opening support act 40 years ago got £50. And that is still the standard fee for any kind of agency-led national tour. So if you are supporting a band that is doing a national tour, you are first on, the normal standard fee is still £50.
That's appalling.
It's unbelievable. And you think, well, I mean, what can you do with £50? I mean, you were very generous and said the four members of the band, but what about the person who's driving the van and the person who's doing the sound or the lights or the person who's getting? I mean, you can have 8 people very easily involved in that, and that's £6.20 or something each. I mean,
it's not even a pint.
It's not even a pint in most places these days. So, I mean, we're laughing because it is sort of comical, and look, there's a contractual reason why you have to exchange money, and the reality is that most people don't really think that's payment. The payment is that they're getting the exposure and everything. I hate being told that artists should do this for the exposure. I think artists should do it because there's a financial reward.
Well, at the end of the day, you'll only get artists to come back if you're willing to, let's be honest, make it worth their while, because you were doing it to try and make some money, whether it's from the bar or whatever. So, it's a bit of quid pro quo, as a certain Hannibal Lecter used to say.
I didn't realize we were going to be doing Hannibal Lecter quotes, but okay. I'm sure there's another good one that relates to. But I mean, very, very important to understand. The issue now is nobody in that arrangement is making any money.
No,
that's the shocking part of it. The artists are losing money for all the reasons you've just given about how much does it cost them to create that music, rehearsals, everything else. The venue is losing money because simply they can't charge enough on the door for the costs that have come and hit them. And promoters that are involved in that are losing money. Everybody, the key thing is everybody's sort of speculating on what might happen in the future. That's why artists are playing that kind of show, and why promoters are taking the risk. I will say that venues almost exclusively that don't have any possibility of future reward from putting the band on, because that's not how we're connected. That's why we want to see an arena and stadium contribution, because Coldplay, I saw them in the Camden Falcon in I think 1997 or 98 with about 30 other people, and and now it's 10 nights at Wembley Stadium. Now, it's good, full play to them. Let's big them up. They've made the decision to give back to the bands that are at the level they were at all those years ago.
Well, 5 years ago, I did the sound on the back of a lorry for those damn Crows.
There you go. Yeah. So they say there's a great band. Really gone up and played the bigger shows, and it's not impossible for us to connect back again. And I think we're very close to doing that. So it's all very positive, but it just needs to move a bit faster, I think.
Yeah. So in saying that, then you seem to have a bit more of a positive feel to where you are at this end of the year than where you are at the back end of the year, despite the fact that venues are still closing.
Yeah. I mean, and some of that is what we're calling the bubble of hope, which we've got to be careful that venues don't get negative messaging from music industry, or that government doesn't go off course. The direction of travel we're heading in is really good. Government know this. The budget measures were definitely a risky pin to put near that bubble of hope. This metaphor is getting too long, isn't it? But it's people haven't closed because they're now pretty confident that help is coming and that things are going to change. If it doesn't come quickly enough, or if things go negatively wrong, you will see venues start to close in very big numbers very quickly. So we're very focused on, what do we need to do to keep you open until April 2026? What's the opportunity to help you? What can we do in the meantime? What things can local authorities do to make sure, business rates? Local authorities have discretionary rate relief. I would strongly encourage local authorities to think about using that so that music venues don't close before the business rate review is completed and before their new business rates will be significantly lower than what they're being asked to pay in 2025. So, even from the point of view of planning a local authority finances, it would be better to use discretionary rate relief to make sure your local music venue doesn't close down in 2025 than it would be to let it close and then realise that it would all be fine in the future.
Yeah, I mean,
keep a ratepayer for 12-month intervention. That's my angle on that.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's better to have a penny off a million than nothing off anybody.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Can I put you in charge of tax policy, David? Because that's quite the most sensible thing anybody said.
Well, it's true.
This is. I mean, it's a very serious risk. These budget measures. They're the business rates alone, £7 million, immediately puts 350 venues that are already losing money under further financial stress. How many of those can afford to keep going or not fall into debt? That we can see in 2026 maybe an entirely different situation.
Yeah, that's a third of the number of venues in the country.
Yes.
I mean, it make it harder again.
Yes, it will. Absolutely. And it's not, it's solvable, but it's going to take a bit of work. And that's really what we do. We're trying to argue at a national level, and then we'll argue at a regional and nation level, and we'll argue it everywhere we can. If we can get venues through this next 18 months, I think we can get to a level of economic viability where perhaps we could finally have a conversation about whether it should be £100 or £150 for being the open act rather than 50.
Yeah,
maybe we can sort out some of these long-term issues.
So do you see a role in all the money the money that you're getting from the artists and the potential money from the ticket revenue? Do you see a role for the Music Venue Trust in supporting the fees for artists at a local level?
We've actually already did it. We had some money from the National Lottery. We did a 2.5-year partnership with the National Lottery. And on those tours, look, there were arguments. I'm not going to pretend there weren't. But on those tours that we put out, I think we put out in total something like 300 artist tours across a 2.5-year period. And on all those tours, the opening acts should be paid £150. Which is still not enough, but it's it's better than where we were.
Better than 50, yeah.
Better than 50, and there were difficult moments in which the music industry said, "Well, no, if there's an extra £100, it should be going to the headliner," and we took a stand and said, "No, look, this is about making it economically viable for people to play." So,
talking about things like the headliners, obviously there's this big issue going on at the moment with dynamic ticket pricing. And I know why it's hit the headlines, but it's been there for a while. It's just nobody big enough complained enough about it until recently. And it's partly the law of supply and demand. But I mean, how much money do two people need? Sorry, I didn't say that.
You can be very specific with me, David. Do you mean the Oasis chaps?
No, but this is the reality, isn't it? I mean, if they turned around and said, "Well, we'll give 10% of those ticket sales to the Music Venue Trust," I'm sure you'd be very happy.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't expect them to do that much. £1 on every ticket would have raised £1.5 million, and £1.5 million would be enough to get an extra 100 artists out on tour, being very well paid, and that would generate work for support bands, for sound engineers, fills up the venues. 150 bands playing 10 shows each. There's an extra 1,500 shows. That's the kind of additional work that we need to get behind artists and get them to reaching the audience they need. So it was a missed opportunity. And on the dynamic pricing, I personally, forget about my job, I don't like it. I don't think it's the right relationship between artist and fan, and I'm disappointed when people do it. There are some reasons why it's happened. I do understand that. It's to do with secondary ticketing and to do with supply.
Secondary ticketing is a completely different issue again, isn't it?
Yeah. But that secondary ticketing has driven the prices up where, understandably, artist managers and the artists themselves have looked at The famous one is Bruce Springsteen, where when Bruce Springsteen did it, people were like, "Well, this is not in line with his attitude towards life or what he stands for." I don't disagree with that, but tickets were going on secondary ticketing sites for £4,000, and I think Bruce and his manager looked at that and thought, "Well, if somebody wants to pay £4,000, why don't they give it to us?" Which it's difficult to argue with. It is supply and demand, and so there's some market economics there. But I personally think that the price should be the price, and certainly around those Oasis tickets where people were queuing for hours and then got an entirely different price. Yeah. That feels unfair to fans to me, and I'll make myself unpopular by saying that. But I do think we're not in the kind of industry where that practice feels appropriate. No. People love live music and they feel really connected to the artists they're buying the tickets from. We shouldn't be getting in the middle of that and making people feel less favourably towards the artists. That doesn't make sense.
Recently, like I said, beginning of this week, I went to see Blackstone Cherry, another one of my favourite bands. But last year they did a small venue tour and they played the Fleece in Bristol. You know, unfortunately, I missed the ticket for that one, but with 200 people, it was likely it was going to happen. And there's Ed Sheeran. He makes sure that he sells all his tickets, rather than going through agencies. So the artists have ways of doing it. It's just the desire to do so.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I'm not critical of artists. There's a lot going on, But I do think it's good to be aware of what all the people around you who help you with your career are doing, and to be very informed about it, and to therefore, the Oasis thing was we didn't know anything about it. Well, that's not really a proper excuse. You should have known about it. Something like that is something that if you weren't part of the decision making, that's a mistake. And I don't expect artists to sit in every meeting or anything, but that's quite a big thing to be doing, and then to say, well, we didn't, it wasn't our choice, we don't know anything about it.
I understand there are huge amount of costs in these stadium tours and things like that. There's no argument about that. But then, if you take the Principality Stadium for argument's sake, the Oasis tickets were £138 for the cheapest one. And if you take, there were 70,000 people at £138, that's £10.5 million.
Yes.
Just for one venue for one night. And yes, there are costs associated with it, but there are probably other ways of doing it that could be a bit fairer to everybody that's involved. Particularly the grassroots.
Yeah, we've got examples. Coldplay is probably the biggest live act in the world, biggest live band certainly in the world at the moment. They've managed to work out how to do it. Sam Fender's on a particular moment in his career where he's now able to sell out arenas. Now he's going to sell out stadiums. He's managed to do it. Katy Perry's managed to do it. So I think I'm really going to stick to the point. I don't believe this sort of initiative should be exclusively artist-led. I think agents, promoters, managers, ticketing companies, the arenas, the stadiums, everybody should be nodding at this and saying, this is just common sense. It's good for us to have a new supply of artists coming through. It's good for us that there are communities around the country being served with live music. That means they are live music consumers and therefore are our future ticket buyers. If you live somewhere where there's no music venue left and no bands can form and play anywhere, why would you suddenly buy a £138 ticket to go and see Oasis? If live music isn't part of your life at all, then we shouldn't expect you to suddenly become a major live music consumer. So this is in everybody's interest. It's just a question of getting it done.
Well, thank you for your time. It's an interesting conversation on several fronts. I'll watch this space. Like I said, I'm on the information list from the MVT, so I'll get those things through regularly to keep an eye on it.
Fantastic.
And this will go out now, sort of 7 o'clock Monday evening.